Hey guys, it's QuickyBaby and welcome back to World of Tanks, and today's video is going to let you know everything there is to know about the upcoming update 921, which should hit the live servers next month. There's a whole heap of changes. Primarily, we're going to be finally seeing the statistics of the FV217 B183 replacement, the FV217, and some gameplay of the Badger. There's also 3 new top-tier French heavy tanks, which kind of play a bit like a Super Conqueror meets some of the high-tier German heavies. Thirdly, there's a brand new map for the Grand Battles game mode called the Klondike that I'm going to be showcasing, a whole series of new high-definition tanks. Some of your favorites might be included in that list. And finally, some balancing changes to the mid-tier British tank destroyers. So without further ado, let's get started. So let's begin with personally the most exciting feature of the next patch, and that is the FV217 Badger, which is the replacement for the FV215 B183. Now, don't worry if you do have this vehicle already, it will be a reward vehicle in your garage. And what that means is that you can use any British tank destroyer crew in it without penalty, and they're going to be gaining crew training. Now, one thing to watch out for if you're planning to play the Badger as soon as it's released is that it's actually got 6 crew members and not 5. And so if you want to have the edge in your Badger as soon as it's released, make sure you're training up a radio operator right now. Now, one thing that Wargaming did on the test server is they actually reset all of the skills of your FV215 B183 crew as they assign them to the Badger. And so this means you're going to be able to reassign skills and perks of your choice, but the radio operator just came at 100% skill, and so unless you're willing to boost him, I do recommend you train him up before the next patch. Now, if you want a detailed rundown of the statistics of the Badger, stick around to the channel because I'm going to be showing you how it stacks up compared to the tier 9 British tank destroyer, the Tortoise, as well as also its tier 10 tank destroyer competition. But in a nutshell, I'm going to give you the 30-second version for this video. Number 1, it's got a fairly weak lower plate. It's got about 250 millimeters of effective armor when it's not using any of its gun depression. However, its upper hull is utterly incredible. About 300 to 330 millimeters of effective armor on the upper part of the vehicle if it's not using its gun depression. And if it is, well, nothing apart from the best premium rounds on the tier 10 tank destroyers are going to be contesting it. Now, unlike the Tortoise, it uses a 123mm caliber gun, which means that the vehicle has 480 alpha damage, which is a substantial upgrade over the 400 that you had on the Tortoise. Now, one thing before I move on to the highlight of the vehicle, I'd like to clarify that this vehicle has no upper weak points. Remember, the Tortoise has a god-awful kind of machine gun up here, and if you're wondering why the FPS is going a little dodgy here, it's because there was lag on the test server when I was playing it. The fact that the Tortoise, oh look at that, 661 Hesh round, oh yes please. However, we're going to load I think an AP round now with the follow-up against, no, we were actually continuing to load some Hesh there against the T110E5. But the fact that the Badger doesn't have an upper hull weak point just means that you can be so much more aggressive and just sit along a ridge line equally. But in the Badger, you have 5% more DPM than the Tortoise. And remember, the Tortoise had the highest DPM in the game. If you fully pimp the Badger out and you upgrade it with absolutely everything, you can get up to 4,800 DPM. But if you're not using things like the bond equipment and the bond directives consumable, you can still get up to about 4,500 DPM, and you'll be killing multiple tanks a minute, multiple tier 10 tanks a minute if they sit in front of you. And that's really the strength of the vehicle. The fact that I could just go around that corner and go, okay, you know what, T110E5, maybe you damage me, but I'm going to damage you a hell of a lot more, because pretty much I've got 50% more DPM than a T110E5. This vehicle was actually firing 10 rounds a minute with 480 alpha damage when it was fully tricked out. It truly is an absolute monster frontally, and if you can get it on a ridgeline, well, its armor holds up, and it doesn't take you long to be able to rack up 5,000 damage in a close quarters combat situation. I'm really looking forward to the Badger, and as I mentioned, stick around, I'll be giving you a full tank review on the vehicle coming to the channel soon. However, if French tanks are more your thing, well, I've got good news for you. There's going to be a brand new tier 8 French heavy, the AMX 65T, a tier 9, the AMX M4 51, and a top tier AMX M4 54. Now, firstly, one of the most important bits of information you can take from this video. As I mentioned on Twitter, on Facebook recently, I suggested you unchecked accelerated crew training for your AMX M445, and it is going to cost you 62,000 500 experience if you want to be able to unlock the AMX 65T on day 1. And so how is the AMX 65T going to be at tier 8? Well, we can see it's kind of got the hull design of a 5120. You know what? That's not too bad if you manage to use the 8 degrees of gun depression this vehicle has. One thing that is nice, however, is this vehicle has about 200 to 250 millimeters of effective turret armor, and the weak point on top, well, it's not great, but it's not tragic, and low tier tanks are going to bounce off it, and if you do use your depression on the vehicle, it's going to make it just a little bit stronger. All three of these vehicles are also fairly quick, limited 40 kilometers an hour forwards and 15 backwards, with a really nice specific power ratio for a heavy tank. Now the tier 8 AMX 65T has a choice of 2 competitive guns on the vehicle. You can use a 100mm, which is a lot like the gun that you will have on the Liberté. And one thing that is nice about this vehicle is you can actually unlock this gun on a variety of tanks. Firstly, the AMX 30 prototype, the 5120, the Batchatillon 25T, the Batchatillon 25T AP, and the 5100. So if you have any of those vehicles, then you'll have already unlocked this gun. However, if you absolutely love large caliber guns, then maybe the 120mm will be more up your street. Now you're going to lose a little bit of DPM, your accuracy is going to get worse, but your aim time is actually going to get better with a larger caliber gun. And now for one thing that I'm really confused about. Your penetration drops with your standard ammunition, but look what happens with your premium rounds, 325mm of APCR. That's absolutely shocking. I wonder if this is intended. I wonder if Wargaming are going to make this probably one of the biggest gold noob tanks in the game. That's tier 10 premium penetration, not tier 8 heavy tank. And while I really hope that Wargaming address this, as with everything in this video, I'd like to clarify that this is stage 1 of the test server, and there's always a stage 2, and everything you see is subject to change. So let's take a look at the tier 9 vehicle. It's pretty much the same as the tier 8, but its armor gets significantly better, and you've got a choice now of using a 127mm gun on this vehicle. With 470 alpha, a decent standard pen of 242, but what is wrong with the premium pen 258? Absolutely bizarre, and I just don't think that this gun is that much better than the 124 and 128mm guns that you get on tier 9 German heavies and tank destroyers. And one thing that really sucks about the AMX M451 is its side profile is absolutely atrocious. I got penned so many times by premium Hesh rounds here from both Badgers and also from FV217 B183s and 4005 stage 2s. And also look at the angling on the front of the hull. As this thing comes around the corner, it seems to get tracked quite often, but if you do manage to come around with the right angle and the enemies don't shoot your side weak point when you over angle, the armor on this tank is absolutely awesome, with 180 at the front and 300 on the turret. And that's something that's felt when you make the step up to the AMX M454. Oh, I don't know. Wargaming, I really feel like you're being a bit lazy with the tank design, but I understand that there's only so many vehicles you can put in the game. Look, here's the tier 9, here's the tier 10. I mean, practically the same vehicle, right? And I have to admit, it's a little disappointing after the Conqueror and the Super Conqueror that practically look like the same tanks. Nevertheless, this thing certainly has a lot more armor, 220 on the front of the hull, 300 on the turret, and it has a choice of 2 guns once again, 120mm that... Well, the accuracy and the aim time look great, but that rate of fire looks abysmal when we compare it to the Super Conqueror. And it also can use a 130mm with 560 alpha damage. Wow, that's pretty nice. And this is a good gun with regards to everything apart from the penetration. 280 premium, 250 regular. It's just not quite going to compete against the Panzer VII and the Type 5 Heavy, for example. And when I was playing this tank, I'm not sure if it was because I was playing the Badger and everything seems a bit lame after playing the Badger with regards to DPM, but I just couldn't quite kill my opponents quick enough. Sure, I could sit in front of them and last, but maybe that was a problem because I was playing so many grand battles and the Klondike again and again and again on the test server. And I'm personally going to use the 120mm on this tank, and I think that the 130mm, I mean, in an age of increasing armor durability, just 280 and 250 base is just not enough. And while we'll certainly have to wait until the live server to see how these 3 vehicles are going to perform, personally for me, they look like they're going to be a little bit lackluster. And one thing that immensely alarms me is that when I was playing on the test server, just standard rounds felt absolutely useless against these vehicles. But as soon as you dab that 2 key and fired some 300 or 330mm heat penetration rounds, then the armor on the tanks just felt pretty much useless, especially around this mantlet. And in my opinion, if you already have the Super Conqueror or you're grinding your way towards it, I wouldn't really bother with the top tier French heavy. One new feature coming in update 921 is a brand new map to add to the Grand Battles game mode 30 vs 30 combat. It is called Klondike, and I guess it's based in Alaska, and it seems to be a combination of two maps that have been removed from the game. Number one, Northwest. Remember, there was a big pathway along the north of the map that you would have to fight through. Then there was some fighting around the towns, and then a big lower area here down towards the coast. And it also kind of feels that Wargaming might have cannibalized Severogorsk, that map which had lots of pathways through the center as well. And personally for me, it's great that Wargaming are planning on adding new maps to the Grand Battles game mode, because I've absolutely despised only being able to play one. Sure, Sunny Valley, or whatever it's called, Nebelberg now I believe, is kind of fun for the first evening that you play it, but when you get on it again and again and again and again, and it's pretty much 20% of all of the games that you play of World of Tanks, it's kind of a little boring, and so I've unchecked the Grand Battles game mode. So what are my initial impressions with the Klondike, this Alaskan map? Well, I feel that your opportunity to isolate your opponents is a lot higher. And I feel on this map that you can get more 1 vs 1s, 2 vs 2s, 3 vs 3s, where it felt like on Nebelberg that you were in wide open sniping matches, where if you did get spotted, you were quite often shot by 4 or 5 different vehicles. It was just too punishing. And also artillery felt very, very, very powerful on Nebelberg. Now, while artillery can be useful on the Klondike map, as we can see there are still large areas of open terrain which you have to pass by, there are good opportunities to be able to get into strong locations and get artillery cover. Now, I believe there are going to be multiple versions of the Klondike map, one with standard and also one with encounter, and I think the idea of encounter is quite fun. Nobody's really ever going to cap, and when you make the cap circle this open, it does feel like the Klondike is kind of a kill the entirety of the enemy team or just draw the game. And so all in all, this is a promising map. Wargaming need to add variety to the Grand Battles game mode for it to be enjoyable, at least for me, and I don't know how all of you feel about it. Maybe you agree with me, maybe you disagree with me. Oh, and I should also probably highlight that this map is 1.4 by 1.4 kilometers, which means that its area is going to be what, 1.96 kilometers squared, so it's going to be twice as big as a regular World of Tanks map, a lot like Nebelberg, and so in theory the tank density is going to be the same. However, I have found that everybody concentrates around this area, around here as well, and around here. And so you kind of get 30 tanks in, well, certainly not a 2-kilometer area, but definitely something to look forward to in the next patch. So now let's take a look at some of the more minor changes. Firstly, you're going to be able to show off your badges in more places in World of Tanks. Next up, Wargaming are making terrain-related changes for difficult to access areas of the following maps. I guess that means that you're no longer going to be able to boost into positions. Now let's take a look at some of the buffs and nerfs. Firstly, the T-28, the Tier 8 American non-turreted tank destroyer, has got 101 millimeters from 50. Wow, doubling the side armor? That's a nice durability buff. Next up, the FV217 183 is going to gain an ammo capacity buff from 12 to 20. Oh my word, maybe that means we're going to be seeing people killing 20 tanks in their FV217B 183 in the future. Next up, the Tortoise is kind of getting an irrelevant buff to the 32 pounder, but it is also gaining some increased armoring. And boy, does this look like a significant buff. Oh my word, its lower plate is going from 228 up to 270. Wow, its upper plate is going from 171 up to 215. Look at that now, 280 millimeters of effective armor. What's this, 27? Oh wow, that's being buffed up by 50. What about the cupola on top, 171? Well, it's still going to be fairly weak, but the sides are going to be substantially better as well. So now you're actually going to have to aim at the center of the Tortoise's weak point and not just the outsides. This whole area here was previously an artillery magnet. That's going to be buffed up to 101. What about the roof? Now it's up to 57, whereas previously it was 25 and overmatchable. You're no longer going to be overmatching the top of the Tortoise. Wow, this is a really big buff to this tank. Let's just put it into perspective by changing this to live. Look at what a Tortoise would previously do to a Tortoise. You're pretty much going through here, 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 all of this. Next patch, wow, you're like a 50-50, even less, a 40% chance really big buff to the Tortoise. Wargaming are also increasing the alpha damage of the Churchill gun carrier, if any of you are masochists out there, from 250 to 280, which is nice, and they're also giving it a little bit of a penetration buff to its standard rounds and its premium rounds, but they're reducing the rate of fire, so the DPM is going to remain the same. Now, the AT-15, well, nobody's going to use the 32-pounder on that tank. You're going to get the 20-pounder as quickly as you can on it, but I guess maybe that'll help you if you're trying to grind it a little bit. But Wargaming have also apparently increased the armor hull. Let's take a look. Wow. Oh, this looks like a big upgrade here. Previously, it was 190 millimeters of effective, now 216. What about up here? 205, what it was previously? Well, that's about the same, really. It's just all round much thicker, especially on top of the vehicle by the looks of it. Previously, this whole bar here was 76 millimeters, 146 effective. Now it's going to be 200. Nice. What about on top? Now it's 38.1. Oh, well, it was that previously. How about the weak point? The weak point is still 127 in the center, but you see how they've kind of made the edges of it better? And so there's going to be more reason than ever to shoot at the center of the weak points of these British tank destroyers. However, the AT2 at tier 5 is actually getting a decreased armor hull. Previously, some parts of this tank were 203 millimeters thick. Now it's being nerfed down to 152. So this means that tier 7 tanks are pretty much going to be able to auto-aim at your vehicle, most tier 6s as well. The AT2 isn't going to be trolling its higher tiered opponents, and that means it's also going to take high explosive rounds worse. What about the side armor of the tank? It was 106. It's going to be 76. Oh, well, this thing kind of did need a nerf. I remember playing this during one of my tech tree showcases, and I was just sitting in front of everything and just laughing. Apparently the AT8, however, the tier 6 British non-turreted tank destroyer, is getting an armor buff. So what are they doing exactly? Oh, wow, look at the buff here. Previously, that was 80 millimeters thick. Now it's going to be 205. Wow, complete removal of that weak point. Also looks like this R2-D2 droid on the tank is much thicker now. Previously, it was 100 millimeters. Now it's going to be 152. Wow, rip all tier 4 and tier 5 tanks that are going to be trying to shoot this thing. And also looks like they've improved the upper part here, 76. Oh no, it's actually the same. It's just me angling the vehicle wrongly. What a dipstick. And so all in all, it looks like the AT8 is going to be a much better tank next patch than it is now frontally. So now let's take a look at the tier 7, the AT7, which apparently has increased hull armoring. Okay, what? That doesn't really look like it. Okay, I guess the lower plate here has been buffed up a little bit. What about the weak point on top? It's gone from 101 to 152, which is nice, but that's not really going to protect it against tier 7 to tier 9 opponents. I guess this weak point here has been removed, but the ring around it has been nerfed. Previously, that whole area was 279 millimeters thick in parts. Now it's going to be all 200. What about the side of the vehicle? It's now 101. What was it previously? 101. Not really doing anything to that. Well, that doesn't really look like an armor buff to an AT7 to me. I'm seeing a lot less areas which I'm going to be bouncing off than previously. Wargaming do have a funny idea of nerfing and buffing some tanks occasionally, right? Next up, a kind of insignificant change. The load capacity of the VK4502B has been increased slightly, and the Japanese tier 9 medium tank has had its depression changed over the rear part of the vehicle. And finally, let's take a look at some of the new high definition models. Okay, first up, best dressed. Let's take a look at the most changed high definition tank, the T28. Oh my word. Wargaming, I think this looks absolutely awesome. Hats off to you. What a cool model. And the armor layout has actually been changed. Go check it out on Tanks GG if you're interested. All in all, I think it's a little bit better. And remember, the side armor on this tank has been buffed by double as well. So this is going to be a much more resilient vehicle to go with that 1,500 hit points. Next up, let's take a look at the T2580, its predecessor. Here you go. Well, it's been embellished a little bit. Not really anything too spectacular after you saw the fantastic T28, right? Next, the T25-2, the turreted version. Well, yeah, okay. Also, the Tier 8 Chinese medium tank, the T34-2, is going to be an HD next patch, as well as the Tier 8 Chinese heavy tank, the 110, which looks really quite changed. Is it me, or does this turret look much, much fatter? In fact, the vehicle looks fatter. I thought it was a lot narrower previously. Lots of changes to China here by the looks of it, as the Tier 9 medium tank is going to be HD, and I think the WZ120 looks pretty darn cool now. In fact, when I looked at this during the live stream, I realized that I think the WZ120 looks better than the Tier 10 121. Wonder when Wargaming is going to update the 121 a little bit, because it just looks poor compared to the 120. Now onto some French tank destroyers. Firstly, the Saumur SAU 40. Now you can see the Saumur in HD quality on the front of the vehicle. One of the most ugly tanks in the game, getting that HD revamp. And also apparently we're going to have a high definition bathtub next patch. Oh my word. Yes, we are. Oh, this looks pretty cool. I love the shells on the inside of the vehicle. Great stuff. You Germans might be feeling a little left out. Don't worry, the VK4502P Ausführung B is going to be looking very tasty next patch. As well as one of the German tank destroyers. It's the Stug 3G. Sorry, it's not the 3G, it's the Ausführung B. Whoa, oh, let's not leave that little gun on there. Oh, okay, that looks much better. Next up, people who managed to get a little Tier 2 British ultimate seal clubbing monster with one of the most ridiculous magazines in the game. 40 shells? 9 average damage at Tier 2. How preposterous. This is going to be an HD seal club in all of your beautiful glory. And then disappointingly, we're having to look at self-propelled guns. Nobody wants a self-propelled gun to look good in the game. Oh great, it's more boxy than ever. Next up, one of my favorite looking tanks in HD. This is an incredible model. It is the Type 61, the Tier 9 Japanese medium tank. I love the dust shield, I guess, over the front of the vehicle. This thing looks cool. And one of the streaming delights, a lot of people will remember me playing the Scumbus, the SU-14-2. What a ridiculous looking vehicle. And then finally, the Tier 9 Soviet heavy tank, the ST-1 is getting an HD revamp, and its thumbnail has completely changed as well. Whoa, this thing looks completely different. Well, I mean, it's got similarities, but wow, yeah, things are looking up for the ST-1. And so, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, that about covers it for update 921, and this is apparently meant to be Wargaming's big release for this Christmas time. And yeah, I don't really feel that this is a Christmas patch, Wargaming, I must say. The Christmas period is very important for us gamers, especially us Western gamers, right? We've got a lot more time. We want to spend time with our families, but we also want to sometimes escape from our families and play a few games. And it always feels that Wargaming has released a really big load of content at Christmas. Last year we had 2 new Swedish lines. Previously we had the Czechoslovakian mediums. Before that, I believe it was the Japanese heavies that hit us hard during Christmas. And while sure, we've got some kind of cool features in the form of the Badger and 3 new top tier French heavy tanks that are kind of maybe not competitive currently compared to the Super Conqueror, I just really wonder if this is going to get players to come back to World of Tanks and keep them through to the new year when lots of other companies are being very competitive with releasing their new content. Nevertheless, I hope all of you enjoyed this video, and if you did, give it a thumbs up. I'd really appreciate it. And let me know in the comments down below what you think about this patch, and is it something that's going to keep you ticking over with your World of Tanks gameplay over the Christmas period? And also, as I mentioned, stay tuned to the channel. I've got videos of the Badger coming up, a full preview of that vehicle. I'll also preview the new Tier 10 French heavy tank, and maybe I'll try and show you some Klondike gameplay as well. And as always, thank you so much for watching. You've been epic, and hopefully I'll see you soon.